Am I on? What will I do?
I will turn that on. I generally try to read one night at a time. You know, even when the discussion was, it's all about you know, two bikes feeling
In competition with each other?
you know, why to switch it. Yeah, turn me on switch. Well, see what I'm doing, but you do that.
Am I on? So everybody who's going to be speaking.
I'll see you in my dreams. It's good to see you. Yes, it's going to be interesting. David, who's outside, he's written this book, Doodlings and Doggerel, so we're all very interested. And just hear some music.
Thank you.
There's Enrique's there. And Stephen's here.
Use the rest. No, well, I'll use it.
Methodist Community.
First of all, thank you.
I like that scarf.
Once Jim starts.
Did it come from a black bag? Yeah. Do you know? I think that was. I don't know anything to match it, but it used to be my sister gave it to me. So it gives us double joy, isn't it? To see that it's not there. Because I no longer have the harmony. Thank you. Thank you.
You see things through the childless woman cries. Years of trying, probing, prying, and across the street a girl is crying with 3 little children by 3 different men, and not a penny for things through my eyes. Things through my eyes, the grieving father cries. Don't on the scrap heap at 47. Don't tell me there's a good God in heaven. Living of pills, we've mountains of bills, and my son is always in trouble. Can you see things through my eyes? Through my eyes, my tear-washed eyes. You can see things much clearer through my eyes.
everyone. Oh, hello. Yeah, I've noticed. Thanks. Folks, it's really great that you've come out this evening, or Saturday evening, for this book launch. I really am inordinately chuffed to see you all here. It's great. I'm going to do housekeeping first. These things, I really appreciate that the rules are that, you know, in terms of walking around this place, you need to have your masks on. While you're seated, if you feel more comfortable, you can take them off, unless you start to join in singing with Jim later on, in which case you need to put them back on again. But you know, if you feel more comfortable with the masks remaining on, please, you know, that's entirely okay as well. After the fun and games up here, there will be refreshments in the hall, and you obviously, you know, you can take your mask off for that. But there's also the opportunity to buy a signed copy of the book in the hall. Unsigned ones are cheaper. Actually, they're probably more valuable, as Terry Wogan used to say. Yeah, you can buy them. Lorna will be in the corner with a limited amount of change. Yeah. So, you know, it may be $6.50, but, you know, don't let that limit you, because the proceeds are going to the chaplaincy project at Copelands. So it's not lining my pockets at all. But look, let me briefly just say why my friends here are with us. Jim will go into more details in a moment, but who they are. We have Irene Jovaras from the Focolare Community. And we have Michaela Youngson, who is the Assistant Secretary of the Methodist Church in Britain, but she's also a long-term friend. On this side, I have an even older friend, Diane Holt, née Petherick. And then in the middle, the man who will be the MC for this evening, so you can blame him, is my fellow wonderful wanderer from the Four Corners, Jim Deeds. Thank you.
Hear me on this? Oh, wow. You certainly can. I never ask, am I loud enough? I always ask, am I too loud? It doesn't seem to work that way for me. Isn't it good to be here? Isn't it just great to be here? And what a joy it is to be able to celebrate this moment with David. And he just truly deserves it on all sorts of levels. But he has produced just the most joyous, wonderful, wonderful little book. And remember, books can change the world. We'll talk about that later on. You're in for a treat, and I'm going to sing. Just so I'm not going to set the bar too high. Yeah, you're in for a treat tonight. We've got some really, really interesting people on the stage, and all of whom have a connection to David, and indeed the book that we are launching this evening. So we're going to hear poems, we're going to hear some music and songs, and find out a little bit more than a little bit about David. So we are here, and there are people down the lens of that camera. So my mummy and daddy are watching. Mummy and daddy. So there's at least two people watching down the lens. No, there are people in.
There are people in London.
London.
Devon, Dorset. Potentially America as well. So yeah.
All over the world. So we are. In these strange times that we find ourselves, we have come to rely in some way even more on social media and on video conferencing, etc. And while it's great for us to be back, it's also great to welcome people. So if you're here online, you're very, very welcome to be here. The book is published by New City. So it's great to know that we have Focolare, the Focolare movement. We'll hear a little bit about that in a while, Irene. But we have members of the Focolare community here, and indeed we have people watching from...
I think from the New City Publishing House
Is that, yeah?
in London as well.
In London,
And perhaps other parts.
Thank God. Good stuff, good stuff. So without further ado, David Campton, congratulations on your book, Doodlings and Doggerel. But why that title? David, we need to know, what's that about?
I have had a certain level of abuse from my wife with regard to that title. And indeed, another person in this panel has given me a level of chastisement for it, and some of how I talk about the content of it, because doggerel, as many of you will know, is rough verse of irregular metre, and essentially not very good. And it's not that I'm saying that it's not very good. I'll leave that for you to judge. But it is a lot of it is of irregular metre. It certainly is. And it reflects the fact, as I've said in a couple of interviews. David, sorry, could you take that down just a little bit? It's just pinging a wee bit. That's better. I've had no professional training in poetry beyond O-level. That's how old I am. So, it's all just relatively amateur. I'm an enthusiastic amateur. The doodling side of it is that the poetry within it fall into two camps. There's some of it that was written that came really out of me being involved in devising performance pieces, and they were generally pieces that were written for others' voices. And notably, this woman on my right, both in terms of reading, performing, singing pieces, but others as well. So they were written for that context. Or they were written as a bit of, frankly, therapy that I never thought... Yes, I would have put them on my blog almost as a online journal, as a form almost of psychotherapy. But I never thought they'd end up inside the boards of a book, as it were. So doodlings, they literally are me trying to distill my thoughts. Doggerel, well, I'll let you assess whether they're doggerel or not.
So David says it's not very good. It is very good. Any of you who've read any of David's poems through the years will know that it's bound to be very good, and it's a very, very good book. Let me just read something very good. To counter your doggerel and your doodling, I give you the 8th day. On the 8th day, the Lord arose, and the work goes on with us, his apprentices, implanted with his seed, soul seed of creation and salvation, creativity and recreation. So it continues day and night, the living word, bringing order out of chaos, day in, day out, week in, week out, resting from work, working from rest, until the last minute of the last day, when finally the hands of time tip over into eternity, when all creation bows before its creator, and once more the creator says, "It is good." It is good. It is good. That poem is good. Yeah. But there's a wee hidden gem. Did anybody spot, anybody of a certain age perhaps, or a certain interest, did you spot? Let me read you this line and see if you can spot it. I'll give you a clue. Radio 4. Until the last minute of the last day, when finally the hands of time tip over into eternity, when all creation bows before its creator. Where did you get the inspiration for that?
Humphrey Littleton.
Humphrey Littleton. I'm sorry I haven't a clue. Does anybody remember Humph? From I'm sorry I haven't a clue. It makes me smile, but it is good. The book is good. Now, you told us there that the poems fall into a couple of different camps, and you referenced in that your love of the arts. I listened to you recently on Radio Ulster, on Sunday Sequence, with John Carson and David G., I think they called him on the day, David Grant.
David Grant.
When you were discussing arts and evangelicalism, tell us something about how you got into the arts, your journey into that, and maybe recount some of those barriers that you faced growing up.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, it was largely through school. I went to school with this woman, and the school that we went to had a very, very strong drama tradition. Mm-hmm. And so from 14, I was involved in Shakespeare, producing a full Shakespeare play every year. And sometimes, between the two of us, hijacking the direction of it as well, because we were, relatively arrogant young things. But you work with Shakespeare, and you begin to one, start to enjoy poetry, but also have a very firm sight of, there's a fairly high bar there. But that's what drew me into being interested in poetry, but also theatre. But at the time that we were going through school, careers information and advice was, if you were good at a range of subjects, if you were good at science, go down the medicine track. If you're good at arts, well, it's more likely to be law for you. And if you're mediocre at both, teaching's an option. And that's no insult to teachers, but that's, that was the level of careers advice.
It sounded a wee bit like an insult to teachers.
No, it was an insult to teachers in terms of the advice.
Yeah.
It's not something that I've carried with me at all. But I went down, because I was good at sciences, I was encouraged down the science route, and towards medicine. But I have to say, about 6 months into doing A-levels, I thought, wise up. I don't want to be doing this. I want to perform, I want to get involved in theatre. But when you're 17, 18, the idea of going back a year, and unfortunately it was forced on my son for other reasons, but the idea of doing that voluntarily, nah. So the scheme I dreamt up was, at that stage, given that you had grants, that luxury, remember those?
Wow.
I thought, I'll go to Edinburgh. There's quite a bit of theatre that happens there. I'll go there and I'll do a subject I could do blindfold and spend all my time in the theatre. And so I did. I went and did biology, but really spent, I would say, Sally will tell you, probably about 80% of my time in the local theatre, both the student theatre and the various professional theatres around. Doing not just acting, but ultimately directing, sound, lighting, stage fighting direction, stage management, you name it, I was up to my ears in it. And that was the direction of my life. So I thought, until, God has
other plans.
Yeah. But, so that's where I met Sally. And she always reminds me that she did not marry a Methodist minister. That was the route I thought I was going to be taking. But it wasn't necessarily encouraged as such. And with the greatest respect to my mum and dad, they didn't really understand that. My two older brothers are here. I think Robert and Isabel saw more performances than my mother and father ever did. It was outside of their purview. It wasn't part of their culture.
Yep. Absolutely.
So
I mean, we're very familiar with your work in the arts. Even from the Four Corners Festival, you always keep our focus on drama. But at some stage, there's this shift and a move towards poetry. Now, I met Robert at the Four Corners Festival, and he was sure to tell me, you're not the first poet in the family. There's a history of poetry there. But when did you begin to make that move into this interest in poetry? And then from there, how did it become this book? What was the journey for you to the book?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think but like a lot of, teenagers going through enormous angst, boy, do we write a lot of rubbish that passes for poetry.
Yep.
We've all done that. And I suppose there was an element of processing angst and other emotional stuff that I carried on in some shape or form. It just got better, and I did work at it and thought more clearly about it. It went latent, it disappeared for a number of years. But then, to be perfectly honest, that therapeutic value of it was came to the fore, about 10, 12 years ago when I went through a difficult time, and I needed to find a way to process external and internal issues in a more creative way. And I wasn't getting to process it in performance or even at that stage in writing for others because, for one reason or another, those doors had closed to me. And theatre is a naturally collaborative art, and if no one wants you to collaborate and you don't have the energy to draw others to you to collaborate with, then you need to find some other vehicle, and poetry became that vehicle for me. But as I say, it was never intended, for anything other than processing issues, but in a distilled way. I could have ranted, for weeks. You see, I can talk for ages. As I say, I think with my mouth open. But poetry's about distilling those thoughts down.
Let me just stick with that. It strikes me that there are some very personal poems in this book. The Dawning of the Day. David will talk about fear and regret. Joy. We'll talk about what makes you happy. Protestare, am I saying that right? It's the Catholic in me doesn't know how to say that. Protestare speaks...
Sticks in your craw.
Let's not start this now. This is becoming like a Four Corners meeting. I don't want to go. Yeah. Protestare, but then in that poem we're going to hear something of your Protestant identity. How much would we learn about you if we sat and read cover to cover? How much of you is in this?
I mean, it's all me. And partly because it was never originally intended for, publication as such. Yes, it was online, but as I say, I tended to do that almost I never had the discipline for journaling. So I blogged because then others kept me honest, and that's how a lot of them developed. So it's all me, but I mean, I would say you need to talk to the people who know me best as to whether it really reflects who I am, like everyone else.
So come back next Saturday and we'll have Sally here for 2 hours. How does it feel? How does it feel now? There is an anonymity that comes with social media. You can get away with it. You can be a keyboard warrior. But how does it feel now to have the book in your hand and actually look about and see other people holding a little bit of you in their hands? How does that feel?
It was, I have to say, and there's a wee there's a positive and my slightly negative side of me about this. When the agreement for this happened just before COVID. I mean, 2 years ago, the company said, we'd be interested in publishing this, and I went, you what? Because poetry collections are where words go to die. People write things, and no one publishes poetry. So I didn't expect this to be published. I was collecting other stuff together to be published, and they picked up this. They said 2 years ago, and then it sort of, COVID happened, all disappeared. I'd almost assumed that it was never going to happen, and then, lo and behold, this arrived.
Here it is.
And actually having it in my hand, as I said in church a couple of weeks ago about something else, the last time my name appeared on the front of something with an ISBN number on the back, it was a relatively somber monograph on, the culture of forgiveness in Northern Ireland,
wow.
Or a cheery little number. But this was all me. And I was chuffed. I mean, we've got friends here who, another of our mutual friends said, my goodness, he's actually smiling in that photograph. When Sally took a photograph, I don't think he'd ever seen me smile. And then there's another side where literally, about 4 or 5 years ago, I was sitting having dinner with someone about a number of issues in Slim's across the way, and he was talking about the various things that I was involved with, and I said you'll never actually get round to writing a book. Tell you.
And showed him, tell you, not be saying that to David Campton.
I feel like sending him one.
Yeah. Well, a photograph of you not smiling.
That's not nice. Let's
change the vibe. We're going down.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going down.
Well, congratulations. It's fantastic that it's here, that you've let it go, and there's that little bit of vulnerability for any poet or author when it's out, but fear not, because it's good stuff. So place is really important in not only your poetry, but a lot of the things that you write. We've already name-checked Scotland, where your heart was captured, thank God. Belfast is a really important place. We both write and talk a lot about Belfast. I'm going to invite our first reader of the evening now to read in a moment a very Belfast-titled poem and tell us a little bit about it. But the link here is that David talked about the company who published the book. They're called New City. They are a publishing house part of the Focolare movement, and we have Irene Jovaras from the Focolare Community here in Belfast. We have a community of people, and some of the people are here, thank God. You're very welcome, Irene. Good to see you. Will you tell our friends here and online who you are, and just a little bit about the Focolare Community? What is it?
What is it? Well, I think it was Austin Ivory said, trying to explain the Focolare is like trying to nail jelly to the wall, a jelly to the wall. So it's, my name, well, who am I? I'm Irene Jovaras. You can tell from the accent, I come from across the water. But don't be deceived, the Jovaras, but my parents were Lithuanian, displaced persons at the time of the Second World War. So how did I end up here in Belfast? Because I'm part of an international organisation which began during the Second World War, actually, in the midst of the air raid shelters. A group of girls found themselves reading scripture, reading the Gospels, and asking themselves, is there an ideal that we can have in our life that bombs can't destroy? And as they read the words of scripture, those sentences like God is God, God is love, love of one another, all those phrases enlightened them to make a choice, to choose God as their ideal. And they didn't want to start up a movement, or they simply wanted to live in such a way that you could rewrite the Gospels looking at your life. And so this work, which started in Italy, in Northern Trent, in the Catholic world, eventually the lifestyle that was generated attracted others. People said, how come in the midst of all this you have that joy? Where does it come from? We want to live the gospel. And so a nickname that was given to that group was Focolare, which means the fireplace or the fireside. And it's a name that's remained, that's stuck. Contact with Christians from other denominations. They said, why don't you Catholics read the gospel? You know, the contact with some Lutherans in Germany at one point in the 60s. Yeah, well, yeah. And so there's more uniting than dividing. So that's who am I? I've been captured by that passion.
Yep.
That all may be one would be the kind of the fundamental goal of the Focolare, to contribute in some way to the fulfillment.
So it's a great charism of welcome and unity. There's no doubt any of us here who have experienced the Focolare people will know that. Irene, how long have New City Press, how long has that been part of the Focolare?
There's probably somebody here who would answer that question.
Shout out the answer.
But I think way back in the 1950s, the publishing house that producing reflections, meditations, updates of events was very important. So the New City Publishing House goes back to the 1950s.
Wow,
They produced a magazine, New City, which was a way that, because of its international dimension too, I think there are many publishing houses now in many countries. It's based in London, the one for UK. There's an English-speaking one in America. It's the written word is particularly important too, and not just spiritual writings. There are many, there would be theological works, different levels of work, and thankfully poetry
And
as
good
well.
poetry books. Very good. Irene, will you read for us then, our first reader of the evening, and you're going to read?
The Ballad of the Big Fish.
The Ballad of the Big
And
Fish.
I love this poem. At one of the Four Corners Festival events, I remember hearing this and being quite blown over. It struck a lot of chords in me. The Ballad of the Big Fish. I am the fish that leaps the weir. I am the river from moor to mouth. I am the cloud that lowers above. I am the rain that tears the tears of the sun. I am the gull soaring and strutting. I am the seedling in crack and crevice. I am the hillsides embracing the city. I am the word bringing all into being, in whom all things hold together. I'm the car rushing on by. I'm the bike crossing the bridge. I'm the lights dictating the traffic. I am the sun looking down on all. I'm the boat bound for abroad. I am the waves on which it sails. I am the wind blowing where it wills. I'm the breath, bringer of life, hovering over the chaos. I'm the fire of every hearth. I'm the roof for every head. I'm the bread on every table. I'm the queen of every hive. I'm the heart of every creature. I'm the womb of every life. I'm the tomb of every hope. I'm the beginning and the end, and every step of the journey in between. I am.
Thank you, Irene. Beautiful. Beautiful, Ryan. Beautiful stuff. Love that too. Belfast matters to you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The Four Corners Festival, of which you're a director, matters to you. The wonderful wonder that you do every year matters to you. How did that feature? Tell us the story of it featuring in the.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah. This is probably the oldest poem in the book in some ways. Not only, I steal my stuff on a lot of occasions. But this is stolen from a very good source. It's stolen from the Ballad of Amergine, which is likely to be the oldest poem in the Western world. But he didn't mention bikes. That's all my own work. But this poem had been in my head from just after I came back from Scotland in the early 90s. But I wrote it up on an Amstrad PCW. Anyone remember them? There isn't a computer system in the world that can read those discs anymore, so dear knows where that is. So it really just festered in my head until I was asked to write something for an event that Margaret Silf, who's a leader of spiritual retreats, was over leading Sacred in the City. The actual event didn't happen. So I had this poem, and I thought, I want to do something with this. It's been festering there for so long. So I then essentially bullied this man into us designing the Wonderful Wander for that year to go along the Lagan, and I delivered it in front of the fish, in which inspired it. By the bridge there at the Lagan, and which we took Mickey to today, so she could know where it was. And yeah, it was one of a range of what I call place poems that are really shaped by the geography of this city of ours, and I've continued to write them, and between the two of us, we weave them into the Wonderful Wander every year, and if you're up for a 2-hour wander and us talking at you,
How could you have not sold it any worse than It's sure to be bumped next year, David. So what you need to do now, is buy your copies. See what I did there? Copies of the book tonight, one for you, one for friends, and go down to the Big Fish tomorrow and read the Big Fish. Irene, what page is it on? So on page 12. Okay, so if you've got the book, go to page 12 and go read it and the place that inspired it. Now, I knew some of the things that you said about it being the oldest poem and who it was inspired by, because David has actually written 2 books. Okay, this looks like one book, it's 2 books. The footnotes in this book could have been published as a book themselves. You'll see what I mean as you pick it up. Sometimes the footnotes are bigger than and it's fascinating.
It's like my essays at theological colleges. I dumped everything into the footnotes.
It's fantastic, and it gives a real insight both into your process, but your inspirations. Well, we're going to come back to inspiration in a little while. But tell me, did you always have a plan that the footnotes would play a big part in your...
No, and actually, I mean, because when I blogged them, I would usually put some sort of explanatory stuff on it. And when I was putting it together, I had it, I pulled those out and stuck them into end notes because, in normal poetry books, you don't have an essay at the bottom of each page. Yeah. But then the publisher said, no, we really like those. And they wanted to put them at the foot of each of them, so I listened to them.
2 books for the price of 1. Where would you get it other than in Northern Ireland? The footnote on page 14 says, this was written originally as a performance piece for the 10th anniversary of New Irish Arts and was based on Genesis 1:26-28. That's my segue to Diane. Friendship, inspiration is a real big part of your story. David, you're attractive to people and you're attracted to people. And you've already referenced Diane here as a long-standing friend. This is your chance to get a whole load of stuff back at him now for saying the old friendship. introduce yourself first, Diane, just a little bit about you, and then tell us, why did you choose this poem, and or what does it say to you, and then will you read for us?
Yeah, so I'm Diane Holt, as you said. Diane Petherick, as was, the person who used to sing a lot. Doesn't sing very much now, more leads other people singing. I grew up in Belfast, moved to Bangor, and went to the same school as David, which is where we met, and mutually had a love of Shakespeare, and tried to take over the drama department in the school, really. Ended up training. I went to university to do English and drama, and then trained as an actor, and then a singer, and then worked and lived in London for a while, writing lights, and ended up in pantomime in Belfast. But along with David, I was called by God to do something different, and now I head up a community project called Thrive Ireland, having set up the link in Newton Ards, which is part of the story of what we're doing tonight as well.
Thank God. You are going to read for us The Mirror on page 14 now. Anybody who wants to read along, you can do that. Now, I'm saying that as if that this is to you, but David said to me, tell me what page it's on before. So it's on page 14.
I've got a head like Swiss cheese, so I can't remember where anything is, or indeed what anything's called.
Well, this is called The Mirror. Diane, will you read to us, please?
The Mirror, from Genesis, a celebration of creativity. Have you ever looked at yourself in the mirror of a morning and wondered, what does anyone see in me? The Creator looked at himself in a mirror one morning, a mirror which he had made, a mirror fashioned out of clay, transformed into flesh, blood, and bone. And in the mirror of man's eye, God saw himself. But it was not good, for he was alone, and God was never alone. He was always us. So God made another to make the picture complete. And that morning, he saw himself in the mirror of humanity, male and female, loved and loving, created to create together.
Thank you very much. Did you choose to read that poem? And what?
I asked David to pick.
Yeah.
Because I said, look, there's a lot of them that I could have picked, and it was too hard.
And he picked for you?
And actually, I was supposed to read that in the Irish, and 10th anniversary, and I wasn't well, so.
Redemption. It's redemption.
Yeah.
It's redemption. There are so many references to Scripture, some overt, some oblique references. Has that always been part of your poetry? Have you always sought to reference Scripture? Is there an unpacking of Scripture? Is there an exploration of it for you?
Yeah, my congregation may be relieved at this point to know that Scripture is quite important to me. It is part of shaping who I am. So it's relatively natural for it's not a forced thing. Poems like that, it's much more explicit because that was the context. It was to be an exploration of Genesis and creativity within a Christian context. So that's dead obvious. But even those ones that are are much more personally reflective. My reference point, if it's not some, if it's not Humphrey Lyttelton, it's 9 times out of 10 it's going to be Scripture as a point of reference. Us prods,
We love it too. Hands across the divide. To show us an example of that, I'm going to ask you to read Cracked Pot, which, if you want to read along, is on page 15.
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about where this comes from. Set it in a context for us and then read it for us.
Yeah, and this is probably the first of the sort of mental doodles. Ironically, it was never created to be. It literally was doodled in. I quite often just have a notebook stuck in my pocket, and this was actually when I was training for ministry. I was down in Wicklow. And I was stuck in the manse there on my own, and I was just looking at this, literally a pot that was, literally a crack pot, and this is what I wrote. It's not very long, and it's crackpot after 2 Corinthians 4 verse 7. Cracked clay pot, moss-covered, containing hard, cold earth, whilst beneath the surface sits a seed-stored life, waiting.
Thank you. Thank you. Why did you choose that one? What is it about that very short poem that's important enough for it to be read aloud tonight?
It's about potential. It's about the fact that it's not necessarily about perfection. Despite Methodism and its doctrine of Christian perfection, it's about potential, and it's also, if the Ballad of the Big Fish was the mentally first one written, this is the earliest one that I've got written evidence of. As I say, it dates back to 93, nearly 30 years ago. That's how old I am.
Absolutely, and more. Yeah. And it evokes St. Paul and this treasure that we hold in these earthen jars and pots, and it's a little treasure, and it's a treasure of a book. Will we have some music? This is the first, possibly the only, and definitely the best piece of music you're going to hear. So, Diane, tell us about what you're going to sing for us, where it came from, what it is, and then, thank God, we'll be able to hear you sing.
This is a song called Through My Eyes, and back in 2003, I was the director of a project in Newton Ards called the Focolare Community Centre. And anybody who works in any community involved organisation, whether faith-based or not, knows that a large part of it is, especially if you're in charge, is raising money to enable all of the work to keep going. And we were supporting people with addictions, marginalised young people, older people, and really the loyalist estates around ours. We were doing a lot of peace and reconciliation type work. So I'd been on a steep learning curve of understanding how to engage in that, having, of course, been trained as an actor and a singer. That's very handy for that sort of work. And I was beginning to understand something about community development and getting alongside and journeying with people, not doing things to them. And so I said to David, look, we'd been on sort of similar parallel tracks all of our lives, even if he was in a different place than I was. And I think at the time you were maybe in Springfield Road.
Yeah.
And I said, so he knew exactly the types of work that I was doing. And I said to him, I'm going to make a CD to raise money for the Link, and I'd really like a song that says something about the work that we're doing, about the need of the people and, really about community development. So could you write me a song? So that was really the only brief that he had. And so that he came up really with the lyrics, which weren't changed even remotely, and Darren Baird was presented with them and asked to write the music. And I've used the song a lot when I was talking about the work. So it wasn't just about the sale of the CD at the time, it actually continued to generate quite a lot of income from the sale of the CD, but also because people would support. Because I think it's quite a moving song, and it really summed up a lot of the people that we were working with and the need not to be judgmental, I think, is the real focus. So, and I probably won't be singing it. I said to David I had to relearn it. I hadn't sung it for such a long time. But also this is post-COVID, and my breath is just not quite the same either. So we'll have a go. Through my eyes. Can you see things through my eyes? The childless woman cries, the probate crying. While across the street a girl is crying, with 3 little children by 3 different men, and not a penny for any of them. Can you see things through my eyes? Can you see things through my eyes? The jobless father cries, thrown on the scrap heap at 47. Don't tell me there's a good God in heaven, living off pills with mountains of bills, and my son is always in trouble. Can you see things through my eyes? Through my eyes, my tear-washed eyes, you can see things much clearer through my eyes. Can you see things through my eyes? The hopeless young man cries. No qualifications, no expectations, no job, no hobbies, and no ambition. The only hope for me and mine is to leave this world behind. Can you see things through my eyes? Can you see things through my eyes? The grieving mother cries. Tell me who's to blame, who counts the cost, who knows the future that's been lost. No one dares tell me why my baby died. They all tell me comforting lies. Can you see things through my eyes? Through my eyes, my tear-washed eyes, you can see things much clearer through my eyes. Can you see things through my eyes? Our loving Savior cries. Do you see the pain, the struggle, the loss? Or do you see the fault, the sin, and the cost? Do you see those who deserve your help, or those who get what they deserve? Or do you see things through my eyes? My tear-washed eyes, you can see things much clearer through my
Round 2. Wow. Well, that was beautiful, Dan. Thank you so much. Absolutely beautiful. Beautifully sung, and the words are really very moving. Page 48, when you get your book, read it. It's a great challenge to us all. Speaking of challenges to us all, David, reading this book sometimes read like a manifesto. It's certainly a kingdom manifesto, but I'm curious to know how much of it is your manifesto. Let me read to you from Crying in the Wilderness, page 26. Who will cry out with comfort for the hurting? Who will call out the purveyors of pain, topple the tower monuments to division, and use the rubble as the foundation for God's new motorway? Straight into the hurting heart of this city, into the heart of the problem, into your heart and mind. Cry out. Can poetry affect our politics here? And did you ever think about being a politician yourself?
No, don't even go there. So it has been said that, politicians campaign in poetry and govern in prose. What a load of nonsense. Particularly in this, forgive me, banana republic. Poetry is about condensing ideas and really working through what you're thinking, and then casting another vision. Boy, I'd love some of that from a politician here.
Not a whole lot of poetry.
There's
not a
lot of poetry about the place. And yeah, there are a number of angry poems here about politics, either here or in Westminster. There's one that I read today and thought, boys dear, how'd that get through the filter? Yeah.
We have a tradition in the Four Corners Festival of inviting politicians to events and even having them read. Wouldn't it be lovely to have a number of politicians come and read from your book and see where that takes us? By the way, is Martin McGill here? Martin, get that in the book. Get that in the book for next year.
Don't tell him.
That's not going to happen.
No.
Now, will you hear how important all this is? Assistant Secretary of the Methodist Church in Britain, hymn writer, poet, liturgist, contributor to Radio 2's Pause for Thought, glass artist, former president of the Methodist Church in Britain, all very important. But the last piece of description that David has given me for Mickey Youngson, I think, is the most important, and it's long-standing friend. So I want to introduce you to Mickey Youngson, and Mickey, perhaps you can introduce yourself by reading your poem, your first poem, Prophet Poets, and then I'd love to hear a little bit from you about why that poem speaks to you.
Thank you. I didn't need glasses when we first met.
Nor did I.
This is called Prophet Poets. With words shaped by the living word, prophet poets become incarnate poems, offering new possibilities, metaphors of the metaphysical, windows into the eternal, enabling others to become more than they had ever imagined, but everything they have always been. I'm suffering a bit, Jim, because I haven't got an Irish or a Scottish accent.
Well, I wasn't going to bring it up, but now that you have. How do you know this character to my right?
We met through, I came over to an IMAYC, an Irish...
To maybe just pause a wee second. David, can you take Mickey down just a little bit? We're getting a bit boomy.
It's often best. Reduce my volume, most people will be grateful. So we kind of bumped into each other at an Irish Methodist Association of Youth Clubs event when I was over representing the other bit of MAYC from the other place. And I kind of had quite a long gap of not being in touch. And then it's only whenever I come over here, but I came over for the Methodist conference. I've now been 3 times to the Irish Methodist conference because I deserve treats.
Yeah, she did something very wrong earlier in her life.
And it was great to kind of rekindle that friendship. And Sally and David offered me hospitality when I was over for one of those conferences. And I think we reconnected and remembered just how much we have in common politically and theologically and with our frustrations with the world, the church, and life as it is, really.
Yeah. And following David on Twitter and just watching the interchange between the two of you, I can tell that Mickey's an inspiration to you too, David. Or am I wrong? You can't say no.
Oh, no. I mean that poem. I mean, you'll read the intro. I mean, it's in many ways the genesis of the entire book. And that poem, it's interesting to have Mickey read it because those who were there on the day where she preached at the ordination in Cork, essentially that poem, it's her words. I mean, all I did is, took out the complete sentences, and they're her words condensed into a few lines.
I think most people would be pleased if my sermons were
yours are not as long as mine. Yeah. So, I mean, Mickey's engagement with the world. Is and engagement with me. It's iron sharpening iron. It's really helpful. And I mean, the irony is, poetry is seen as a solitary pursuit. I do not operate in a solitary. That's why me having a book of poetry is an unlikely thing, because at heart I'm a collaborative artist. That's why I love working with you and The Wander. It's why I've loved working with Diane over the years. And where I do write, it's generally about putting words in other people's mouths because I know how they work. So poetry's a strange thing.
We're going to hear from Mickey again to close us out in one moment. You're going to put words in my mouth now, for the people who haven't suffered enough. So David, I'm going to turn this off, or do you turn me off?
So David has asked me to
Sing something.
I'm going to sing something. It's one of his poems.
Say why?
Yeah, you should actually.
Part of the reason why I've asked Jim to sing this is because of a comment on Twitter. Does anyone watch the Hootenanny? Did anyone watch this year and the horror show that was Ed Sheeran singing?
It wasn't so much Ed Sheeran, it was the partner with
singing Raglan Road. This man was incandescent about the abuse done to the song. So I thought tonight I'd torture him by getting him to sing what's actually a Christmas song, but that I wrote to the tune of Raglan Road. And I wrote it, it's one of those that actually I wrote, and it wasn't performed for 6 years because I can't play an instrument, and so There was no opportunity. But then actually the first time it was sung was on this platform on a Christmas morning when number one son was home, and I bullied him into playing the guitar and I sang it and then got the congregation to sing it. But you're not to sing it tonight unless you've got your mask on. But Jim's going to sing it for us tonight.
It was my most popular tweet ever. And I try to be this real positive presence on Twitter because it's a cesspit most of the time. And the one of the few times I said something nasty about anything, and it was like 700 people shared it or something. There we go. So this is called Bethlehem Road. See what you did there, David? Down Bethlehem Road, near Nazareth, came Joseph and his wife. Within her womb, God's promise bloomed, His word, the light of life. He came to take on flesh and blood, to show us all the way. And through the night, a star so bright hailed the dawning of His day. And on the hills round Bethlehem, some shepherds heard the song. The angels sing of a newborn King, awaited for so long. They find Him midst the filth and grime, on a bed of straw and hay, ignored by the earth that He brought to birth, the Lord Almighty lay. And from east to Bethlehem came men who saw the sign. These eastern seers traveled for years to present their gifts so fine. Gold they did bring, fit for a king, and a scent of untold worth. But the gift of myrrh that they offered third spoke of death and not of birth. From Bethlehem His parents fly to save their son from harm. But others die and mothers cry and wail in their alarm. The powers that be have come to see the child as a source of strife. His birth meant despair for the people there, but his coming brought us life. From Bethlehem to Jerusalem is not very far. 33 years on a cold spring dawn, he died on a wooden spar. From he first drew breath till his cruel death, for him there was no room. He took the blame for our sin and our shame, and he was laid in a borrowed tomb. But on our streets, on our roads today, the Lord can still be found. Whenever we well bend the knee, the angel's song resounds. To heaven raise God's glorious praise, and on the earth be peace. Where once again Christ comes to reign, his grace will never cease.
Ed, who? Where's me, love? Lost me, Mike. Thank you for letting me sing that. It does serve me right for slaying the boy. But we're coming towards the end. We've got one more contribution. We're going to go back to Mickey in a little second. Mickey had 2 poems. That's me all night. There we go. Mickey had 2 poems to read, and I asked her to keep this as the last one. And it's a bit of a selfish reason, because it's my favourite poem in the book. And there's one particular line just near the end is just genius. It's genius, so beautiful. So in a moment I'm going to ask Mickey to read as our last poem of the night. And then we'll hand over to David for some final remarks. Mickey, the floor is all yours. Tell us about this poem and why it speaks to you, and then read it for us.
I will, but can I say first of all, I'm someone who, most of my writing is for other people, because often it's liturgy. And I love hearing other people read my prayers, because you always hear something you never intended when you wrote them. And I've loved listening to people say your words, but I'm still hearing your voice. And you've really found your voice, which is a strange thing to say to someone who's been a preacher for longer than his, all his adult life. But you've definitely found your voice, and it's good to see it. And how could a preacher not put explanations underneath and expand on the word? But this one I love because, like you, David, I'm not a trained poet. I haven't done, I think my only decent O-level grade was English, and my English teacher nearly died of shock when I got A. And I too was sent down the science route, and that's where they thought I would go, and I ended up working in an aircraft factory, and God had other plans. It's good to hear that tonight. And over all the years, I've never had a method for coming up with poetry. Poems find me. And I play with words, and words play with me. So this one really, really struck me because it reflects that sense that if you look for them, you probably don't find them, but the poems and the words find you. So that's why I'm going to read. This isn't going, it's a bit singy, is it? Is it sounding all right?
Take it down one notch.
Just, yeah. This is Where Do Poems Grow? Where do poems grow? On the periphery of vision, evading direct attention, a distraction en route to somewhere important, a deer dashing across a field, a flash of a kingfisher's wing, a Perseid streak in the night sky, an overheard phrase across a crowded room. Not often crafted, but birthed, like Athena fully armed out of an overfull head, in the furrows of the mind between the cash crops, found unlooked for, when searching under clutter for something else, wedged between books, mouldering at the back of the fridge, or stuck down the back of the settee with £3.76, a button and a pen.
I'm going to declare that this book is now officially launched. Well done, David. Over to you, Sophie.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, everyone, for sharing that. And yeah, I mean, I really love that Mickey had chosen that poem, partly because she doesn't realise it, but one of the lines actually, again, I owe to her because it was birthed. Mickey and her husband Sandy used to have a canal barge in London, and us being the freeloaders that we are, Sandy and I and the boys spent time there, and it was just lovely to sit on the barge and to see the kingfisher just out of the corner of your eye, just dashing across. And it's one of those where the very genesis of it was taken from another writer. And one of the things about my writing is I hope that it encourages other people to do the same. Because if I can do it, you can do it. But it's more than that. It is about passing on the baton and encouraging. It's encouraging creativity in other people. And that's something that I am deeply, 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 deeply passionate about. Because I do believe that we were created to create together. And there's not enough of that happens. But I want to, I want to finish with a poem. It's not one that, I'm trying to find it here, excuse me, while as I say, I can't remember where anything is. Yeah, Sydney. This is not one of the more complex or, profound poems, but it's the note I want to finish on tonight because of what's happening in the world. And it's entitled Makers. Blessed are the peacemakers, making up, making amends, making friends, making time for others, making space for possibilities, making cups of tea, making a fool of yourself, making sense, making a stand, making a start, making. not destroying. Good night. God bless. I hope you've enjoyed this evening. I hope that you will enjoy the book if you haven't. There are refreshments through the door to the right, and in the corner you can purchase books. And there is also coffee and tea there. For COVID reasons, I have pre-written, I've pre-signed most of them. Yeah, if you want to hunt me out, I might scribble something else for you on it. But enjoy. Again, thank you for being here.
Congratulations.